My name is Daniel Gallant. I'm 38 years old. I currently live in Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. I'm studying Masters in Social Work, focusing on disengagement from right-wing extremism. I spent almost a decade in the white supremacist movement in Canada, and I'm now engaged in a lot of counter-extremist and anti-racism work. So my first introduction to Nazi skinheads was two guys on the street. One was from a group called the Toronto Skinheads, and the other was from White Aryan Resistance and was a former Hammerskin. I started meeting more people from there and getting access to literature and music and stuff. So within a couple years of being introduced, I got online and was introduced to a website called Stormfront and really started connecting with a lot more people within the white supremacist movement in Western Canada. So there's a variety of things that I had accessed, literature being primary for me. So books, old books, new books, speeches from government officials and so forth from historical documents. Some videos, but there wasn't a lot. Music was a big piece for me. So whether that's just the audio or audio and video, and all of that was accessible through the internet primarily. It was harder to get hate literature and hate propaganda across borders, so the internet was the most viable. So I guess the transmission of propaganda was mainly online. The fact that I was so angry and a lack of self-identification and abused and all of those things made me prime for what people in the movement would call a missile, where you take somebody and you pump them full of fuel and you send them off and watch them explode. I later did that to other people, and I believe that's in part what motivated people with me and giving me information. But I believe wholeheartedly that most people in the movement believe they are on the right track, a righteous track, and that they are in a war with society and the system. I quickly learned that in the world, the real world, that pacifism doesn't work and that you need to be violent in order to not become prey. So it's either predator or prey. That was at home. Then when I went to the streets when I was young, it was the same thing. You're predator or prey. And it was a binary like that. So I got sick of being kicked around, and I got sick of being taken advantage of. I got sick of seeing dirty looks from people. I got sick of the judgment from people. I got sick of so much in this society that I was willing to fight at any time. And I did, all over the place. Yeah, lots. It gave me a channel for my anger. My anger was already established, and the movement allowed me to vent my anger and to express it through a justified means and process. So that, yeah, it didn't fuel. It gave me a direction, and it gave me a purpose. The first messages that came from the guys that I met originally, the two skinheads, were that violence was a solution. The other compelling piece was that there was an identifiable group responsible for the state of my life and the state of society. And that was the half-baked conspiracy theory of Zionism as a Jewish-run government, Jewish-run media, Jewish-run society, based in this based in their worldview of Jewish supremacy and all of this sort of thing. The piece with the Jewish conspiracy was linked to everything. The messages around homosexuality and how that's bad was blamed on the Jews and the Jew media. Things like that. Race mixing, as the movement called it, or interracial relationships were viewed as bad and orchestrated by the Jews through media and social programming and so forth, government policies and all that sort of thing. If someone's a Zionist, they're the biggest enemy. That's the bottom line. Some people did talk about how Zionists were intelligent and you got to give them that and that sort of thing. My belief was that they're abusive and manipulative. So there was nothing respectful or honorable about that. The thing that kept me there was the fact that there was identification of who was to blame. And so that ideological thing about blaming the Jews for being responsible for everything, and that violence was an acceptable expression and resolve to issues. And that's what kept me in the movement. So when I got involved with the movement and I had disassociated with my old friends who were First Nations, there was still a few conversations that I had. One particular friend who is half First Nations and half white had told me that he understood my hatred because he hated Indians too, he said. But he also hated white people because they're racist. So there was some gray, a little bit of gray, but I didn't hang out with them. That's a whole other element, is that there's this black metal extremism, and we're seeing Nazi sympathizers and the representation of Nazi personification by people who are not white and are accepted into the movement. I've been at white supremacist meetings where all of a sudden there's a guy from Bangladesh there, but I had to adjust because everyone else was okay with it. And when I considered that, and that presentation that these people can be used as missiles, where you pump them up full of fuel and watch them explode, that's a benefit to our movement. And just like when you recruit somebody who does something major, that gets attached to your reputation. So if I've recruited a guy who planted a bomb, which did happen, my reputation skyrocketed. So it's a whole piece, a cycle that feeds the extremist piece, the extremist goal, terrorism. When I first met the two skinheads, the one who I became pretty close with warned me against skinhead gangs. I was told that they'll manipulate you and use you, and that the true movement, the true soldiers, are the skinheads on the street, and that is the movement. So the guy who recruited me told me that he talked about this concept of a lone wolf, and I better understood it in the language of gangs as being an independent. So that's the route that I went, but I still hung out with skinheads and interacted with lots of skinheads and started recruiting people based on ideology. And even though I was a member of a particular group at certain points, when I recruited people, it wasn't to get membership in a gang. The recruitment was about ideology and teaching doctrine. So the recruitment isn't the way that we see it on TV necessarily. It's more real, and it's about teaching people the ideology and stuff that can't be broken. That way they believe it, I believe it, everyone believes it. Now we're a team and we're spread out and hidden in society. And that's what's going to fortify us when there's a war.